This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. So today we'll continue our discussion about exception handling. In the last session, what I did, I shown you how to implement custom faults or the user-defined faults in card validation system, correct? So this is the card validation system, and I have shown you how to raise a custom fault, and once the error raised, how to catch the fault and replay the fault. I mean, replay with fault signal. I have shown you how it looks like, how the response looks like if the service handles the error and simply returns the output variable, and if the service handles the error and replay the error signal. Okay, I want to okay, I showed you the responses as well in the previous session. Okay, let me so instead of instead of output variable, it's always suggestible to keep the fault variable when you are replaying the fault signal. Okay, then this one we deployed into our test folder, not in the regular default folder. I deployed it into test folder. Let me deploy this into default folder. Okay, I want to test the entire order processing system with this guy, with the card validation system response as fault. Okay, let me deploy this into default folder. Finish. Let's wait for the deployment. So once the deployment completed, we can test the not just card validation system. I want to test the entire flow, that is the order processing system. Okay, how the order processing system behaves when the card validation system is returning a fault signal instead of a normal response. Okay, let's see. Build and deployment is in progress. Build successful. Deployment also finished. So what we can do, I want to test the program. I want to test my order processing system. So this is my order processing system deployed in default folder. Okay, if you check the enterprise manager, just refresh the screen for the latest instance, latest deployed services. Okay, right, come back. So if you see here, instead of Visa, I'm providing something else as my credit card vendor. Then what happened? Order processing system will send the card information to card validation system. In the card validation system, we set a validation. If the credit card vendor is not Visa, raise a business fault, return the fault, replay fault signal. That's what our configuration, right? So now what I want to do, just submit this request, and go to the instance, which one, order processing system, which is under default folder. This one we want to open, and here just observe the instance. What is the instance? I mean, how the flow executed and how the error handled. Go to recent instances, open instance, order processing system, observe what it did. See this, guys, card validation system returned fault, failure. Okay, let's open it. What is the error we got? Let's observe the error. Card validation system error. Okay, let me deploy the order processing system. It looks like code not deployed properly. Let me deploy order processing system with a config file. We must have a config file. Dev config file I selected. Finish. I want to show you how when the card validation system returns the fault signal, how that will be handled in our order processing system. I mean, the invoke activity is calling a card validation system service, right, in order processing system. So how that invoke activity reacts, how the error received, and how the next process executed, that I want to show you. Anyway, let's execute the program once again and get the latest instance. Okay, execution completed. Go back to SOA Infra, Enterprise Manager. Let's refresh. Oh, it is taking time today. Okay, so we got the recent instance. Open the instance. Okay, now observe your order processing system is calling card validation system, and card validation system closed with a fault signal because we are returning the fault. We are returning the fault. Even though we handled it, we returned the fault in the reply activity. In the reply activity, intentionally we are returning fault signal. See this part, if we configure in a generic reply activity, we don't configure this part. It is not required. Whatever variable you configure here, that will go as an output. But because we configured the fault section in the reply activity, so the fault will go back as the fault signal. Okay, right. Now see the order processing system. Go to order processing system. What happened in the order processing system? Your invoke activity, invoke CVS got errored out. Invoke CVS got errored out. Okay, and observe here, invoke activity received fault signal, not the regular response. Within the fault signal, you can see some information. This is our custom XSD. We created our XSD, right? That is the XSD. Okay, so this is the information your order processing system received. From here, it is going to catch all branch. It is going to catch all because in your order processing system, observe here what branches we have: binding fault catch branch, remote fault catch branch, and catch all. So what is the error we received? We received the fault name. Check the fault name here. We received a fault called invalid CC fault. Invalid CC fault. Of course, it's a custom fault in card validation system, but it has a name, invalid CC fault. So your order processing system don't have a catch branch specific to invalid CC error. Okay, invalid CC fault. For that name, there is no catch branch. So obviously control goes to catch all branch. Okay, so this is how your order processing system is behaving. Of course, guys, if you are interested, you can configure a catch branch here. You can configure a catch branch. You can configure the catch branch specific to invalid CC fault. It's your choice. You want to do that, you can do that. Suppose let me do that. Catch branch. I added a catch branch. So the fault name. What is the fault name? I want to say this time our fault is not system fault. Okay, this is a user defined fault or customized fault. Okay, I need to go to the fault was defined in the card validation system WSDL. Go to partner link, card validation system reference, and here if you go to the WSDL, you can see the fault name. See, earlier we configured the catch branches with system faults. This time I'm configuring the catch branch with the invalid CC fault. It's your choice, guys. If you don't configure this, control obviously goes to catch all branch. Any questions? You want me to complete this one? Okay, see here, invalid CC variable, and you can configure the same message. Partner links, card validation system, business fault message. It is business fault message. Done. So I configured a catch branch with the fault name and the fault variable. The fault variable message I browsed here. Okay, say okay. Done. Now what happened in this catch branch, whatever logic you configure, that logic will be executed when the invoke activity received invalid CC fault. Okay, it's your choice. You want whatever you want to configure, you can configure it. What I will do, I will copy paste the same logic here. Okay, I will copy paste the same logic. You can do anything. I'm just pasting the same logic, nothing else. Okay, done. Save everything. Let's deploy and test the program once. So when you are deploying order processing system, must select the config file. We know the background. What we did, we know, right? The config file configuration. It has the endpoints. If you don't select that, we have a dummy endpoints in the composite file. If you don't remember, just go back to the previous sessions. We discussed about the configuration files, right? You can recap. Okay, deployment finished. Deployment finished. Now you can test the program once again. This time, observe, instead of catch all, it will go to the catch branch. Just submit the request and then go and check the instance, recent instance. Let's get the instance. Okay, so we got the instance, right? Okay, open this instance, observe the flow, go to order processing system, and here we got the error. See, this time it is not going to catch all, it is going to catch branch because we configured the catch branch very specific to the fault, this fault name, invalid CC fault. For this fault, very specific catch branch we configured, so control went to that specific catch branch. So any questions as of now from anyone? Any questions from anyone? No? Okay, let me commit the code till this point. Git GUI, I want to commit everything. So what are all files modified? Okay, this people I configured. Order processing people. Anything else I modified? Order processing people. Okay, so catch branch configured for what is that? OPS program. Catch branch configured in CVS scope inside OPS people. I'm just giving some meaningful comment. It's not mandatory to give the same comment. Okay, and push the code. So this is how we deal with catch branch, catch all branch, and throw activities. We use the throw activity especially when we want to raise an error intentionally. Intentionally, we want to raise an error, we go for throw activity. Anyway, let me merge the code. To merge the code, first I need to go to checkout main, and now I need to pull the branch git pull origin feature slash error handler. Okay, now what I'm doing, I'm just merging my code into main branch, local main branch. Now I will push my main branch into central repository. No files left, right, all I covered every file. Okay, now push the code to central main branch. Done. Okay, right. So now I want to discuss another concept, guys. This concept name is fault framework. I mean, we discussed it, right, some time back. So we discussed there are two different ways we can handle the errors. One is by using Beeple activities, and another is fault framework. I want to start discussion about fault framework. Okay, so this is the fault framework we need to discuss. Let me go to new file. So to work with this fault framework concept, I want to create a feature branch from my main branch. Okay, git branch feature slash fault framework. Okay, git branch, git checkout feature slash fault framework. Okay, done. Now I'm in the new branch. Okay, let's initiate the discussion. So guys, by using fault framework also, we can handle errors in Oracle SOA suite. It is not just limited to inside people, even it is the scope of this fault framework is the entire composite, the SOA composite. In SOA composite, we have different components. We have service components, we have component called components, we have reference components. Okay, and in the service components, we can have multiple services. I will show you few other examples going forward. I will show you examples how why we configure so many service components, so many reference components, why we configure multiple component called components. I will show you going forward. Don't worry at this point of time. But technically, it is possible you can configure multiple service components, multiple component called components, multiple reference components in one composite. Okay, not only people we can configure different other components like business rules, human task, mediator. So other components also we can configure here, not just people. We'll discuss about them one by one. Okay, so this the scope of fault framework is composite, not just the people. But this catch all branch throw activity scope is within the people. Within the people, they can handle errors. But this framework is not just people. Along with people, other components also it can handle errors. Okay, so here there are two important files. We have faultpolicies.xml and faultbindings.xml. So this I will talk about faultpolicies.xml first. Okay, so this file, we do everything graphical configuration, guys, but anyway you need to understand how this file works, how this will get operated. So this fault policies file, we can define fault policy fault policy fault policy. Okay, so not just one, you can configure multiple fault policy. Okay, so this fault policy is something a grouping kind of behavior. Okay, each fault policy, I mean, whenever you can define different errors, you can catch different errors by using this each policy. Okay, and you can apply different actions on that policy, on that error. Okay, suppose let's say in this fault policy, let's assume if I got a remote fault, I want to perform one action. I want to perform an action called terminate. Okay, I'm just giving an example. I will tell you what does this terminate means. Okay, so the same fault, the same remote fault, if I want to configure in the second fault policy, I will say rethrow. Okay, in the third fault policy, for the same remote fault, I want to configure a different action. I mean, in one file, you can configure multiple groups of fault policy. Each policy can handle different errors. Okay, and each error can have different action. So if that error comes, I want to perform an action as part of handling the error. Okay, now let me, I mean, not just one fault, guys, not just one fault. You can configure, you can handle multiple faults. Okay, in each policy. I'm just giving some actions. I will show you all the list of actions, don't worry. Rethrow, terminate, you can say retry, something. Okay, if you observe, my fault policies file contains, my fault policies file contains multiple fault policy 1, policy 2, policy 3. In each policy, I'm handling remote fault and binding fault. Okay, And actions, I want to configure my own action. I want to handle if remote fault in policy 1, if remote fault, then I want to perform something called terminate. In policy 2, remote fault, I want to handle something called rethrow. This way, in each policy, you can define what action you want to apply on the specific fault. You don't need to have the same actions on specific fault. Okay, it's your choice. You can decide which one you want to perform. Okay, so this is the high level understanding of a fault policy document. Come to fault binding. In fault binding file, by using this file, what we do, we will manage the connectivity. I mean, it's a logical connection between component and fault policy, configuration. It's a logical connection between component or composite. Okay, so it's a logical connection between component or composite and fault policy configuration. That means this is fault policy. Policy 1, policy 2, policy 3, all policies are under policies document. Okay, now what we do here, we will configure, let's say, in my composite, if any error occurred, okay, execute fault policy 1 or 2, something. So I want to make a connectivity. If in my composite, if some error, any error, okay, in my composite we got some error, let's execute fault policy 2. Okay, other than that, suppose let's say my BPEL got some error, any error, execute fault policy 1. Okay, this way I can configure a logical connectivity between components and the fault policy. So 2 different files. Any questions as of now from anyone? Any questions? Do you understand the relation? Yes, know something? At least say yes or no, guys. If you have no questions, let's say no questions.
No question, sir.
Clear? Okay. So now this is very high level explanation, guys. So I will show you how to configure fault policy document and fault binding document in a SOA project. Okay. Let me go back to the JDeveloper. So guys, I want to implement this fault framework in my order processing system. Okay. So first I want to generate fault policy document. It's very simple. Just select the SOA folder, right click on it and go to new, and you can see from gallery, here you can go to the SOA section, SOA tier, under that faults. Okay, here you can select the fault policy document, say okay. Once click OK button, observe a new file generated in your code, fault-policies.xml. Okay, fault-policies.xml. This is a design view. Of course, you can go to the source view as well. If you are comfortable, you can also do the configuration inside the source view as well. Okay, but it's very, you can observe here one thing. There is a section called actions. These are all the different actions supported by this fault policy document. Okay, different actions. Observe this. Let me show you one action. Abort is an action. Okay, so for this abort action, abort is the actual action, guys. And whatever the ID you can see here, this is a user defined keyword, just a user defined keyword. Now you can change it if you want. Okay, but I don't suggest to do all this customization. You can leave it, the default configuration is enough. But of course, to better understand, this is a user defined keyword, but this is a predefined action. Predefined action comes with your SOA suite. Abort means terminate your process, stop the program immediately. That is the action. Okay, so we have different actions. We'll see a few actions here. Okay, replace scope, rethrow fault. So this way you can have different actions. Okay, let me show you some of the actions. You don't need to do anything with these actions. These are all predefined and comes along with your SOA suite. Only the thing is you need to select which action you want to perform. Okay, let me go back to the design view. See here we have option. You can define any number of fault policy. See, if you click this plus icon, see, you got policy 1, policy 2. In the policy 1, you can rename it. Let me say ABC, ABC policy 1. And this one, XYZ policy 2. Something, it's your choice. You can rename that. Okay. Of course, I'm interested to keep the policy 1 and policy 2 naming convention, but it is user-defined keyword. You can modify the policy name. Let's observe what is going to happen if I create two policy. Just go to the source view, and here you can observe, this is policy 1, minimize it, this is policy 2. So we got two policies, policy 1 and policy 2. If you open one of this policy, you can observe condition section, action section. Okay, condition, and mostly we use condition section, and of course we have alerts, we'll talk about it, and the action section. These two are important sections. Alerts is optional, it's not mandatory to use, but we'll talk about it. But condition and action section are mandatory sections. Actions are predefined, you don't need to do anything. And maximum what you can do is you can rename the IDs. You don't want to go with the default naming convention, you can change them. But this is not the action name, guys. This is just a display name. Actual action is this one: abort, human intervention. These are actual action. Java action, replace scope, retro fault. These are all actual actions. Okay, done. Let's go back to the design. And here policy 1 and policy 2, right? Let me go to policy 1. In this policy 1, I want to handle multiple faults. You can see this, guys. Here I will select the fault. I will say remote fault. I want to handle remote fault. And what is the action you want to perform? You can select the action. I want to select an action called terminate. Let's assume you can add any action. I'm selecting terminate. So this is for remote fault, and I want to perform the terminate action. Okay. Same way, I want to handle one more fault here, not just remote fault. I want to handle binding fault. Let's go to this plus icon. Once you click on this plus icon, see the empty tab here. Click on the empty tab. I want to handle binding fault. This time I want to go with some different action, retro fault. Okay. So what happened in policy 1? In policy 1, I'm handling remote fault with a terminate action, binding fault with a retro fault. This is policy 1 definition. Okay, let me do policy 2. In policy 2, I want to handle remote fault, and this time I want to use a different action. Let me say retro. Okay, done. So I have two policies. In the first policy, I'm handling two different faults. In the second policy, I'm handling only one fault. It's your choice. You can add any number of faults you want to handle. See, this is exactly same as your catch branch. Catch branch, what it will do, it catches one specific fault and perform an action. But there we have more customization option. But here it's not that we can do more customization. I will tell you what different actions we have. But right now I'm using the list of actions in the drop down list, and each action has a specific activity to perform. I will show you a few examples. Okay, done. So you are clear how to configure policy 1 and policy 2 inside the fault policies.xml. Everyone, any questions? Any questions as of now? I just configured. We'll see how to use them. No questions. Now, once this is ready, save it, save everything, save all. Now go back to your composite. Here we need to configure the fault bindings. See, this is the icon to configure the fault bindings. Just click on this icon. Okay, so this guy will create a fault bindings file. So what I want to do, just observe, guys. Here every component you can connect. I told you, right? By using fault bindings, you can connect each component. Composite you can connect with a fault policy. BPL you can connect with a fault policy. Service component you can connect with a fault policy. Reference component you can connect with a fault policy. So each component level you can configure, or composite level you can configure the fault policy. So here what I want to do, we have two policies, right? So my BPL process, I want to select policy 2. In my BPL, if I got any error in my okay, let me select fault 1. Okay, in my BPL, if I got any fault, this fault policy 1 will handle it. In people, if I got any error, fault policy 1 will handle. Okay. In composite, I will say fault policy 2. Fault policy 2. Okay. Now what happened with this configuration? Suppose let's say our card validation system is down, then our people process invoke activity receives a fault called remote fault. Remote fault. So then the people got the remote fault, right? So control goes to fault policy 1. Policy 1. Because as per our configuration, our control should go to policy 1. Okay. In policy 1, it will check for remote fault. So in policy 1, do we have remote fault or not? If remote fault configuration exists in policy 1, the action will be executed. Whatever the action configured, that action will be executed. Suppose this policy 1 don't have the remote fault configuration as an example, then control goes to composite level by default. By default, control goes to composite level. Within composite level, we configured policy 2. In policy 2, are we handling the remote fault or not? If we are handling remote fault, that respective error action will be executed. Okay, let me copy this image. Okay, yeah. Now let me click OK. Observe in your code a new file created, fault binding. Okay, anyway, once go back to your fault policy. See what I'm doing here. In fault policy 1, I'm handling remote fault and binding fault. And in fault policy 2, I'm handling only remote fault. So what is the configuration we did in the binding? What is the configuration we did in the binding? In people level, if you got any error, we are asking to execute policy 1. In policy 1, see in people, if the card validation system is down, what is the error we will receive? We will receive remote fault. We will receive remote fault. So the control goes to policy 1 and check for remote fault configuration. In policy 1, do we have remote fault? Are we handling remote fault? Yes, we are handling remote fault, and the action is terminate. Terminate action or the abort action we want to execute. That means your process will be stopped immediately. It will not do anything else. Suppose, let's assume this policy 1 is not handling remote fault, then by default, control goes to composite level configuration. Composite is always a parent of all components. Components, reference, service, for everything, composite is a parent. It's a platform. So now what happened, if policy 1 not handling remote fault, control by default goes to composite and its respective fault policy 2. In fault policy 2, it will check whether are we handling the remote fault or not. If you go to fault policy 2, if we are handling remote fault, that remote fault action will be executed. Okay, let's assume in fault policy 2 also we are not executing remote fault, we are not handling remote fault, then control go back to the people process and execute catch and catch all branches. So that means, see, in certification exam you will get a question. So if you have catch all in your people and you also have fault framework in your people, okay, in that case, which one will be executed first? Which one have high priority to execute? Fault framework. Fault framework always contains high priority to execute and handle the faults. If fault framework is not handling the specific fault which we want to handle, then again control go back to your people process and catch all branches will be executed the way how we learned. Okay, I want to show you all these steps, all the process what I have explained in this diagram now. Okay, I want to show you component level handling, composite level handling, everything. Okay, any questions as of now? As of now, any question? So we have two policy, we have a binding file. Let me go to binding file. You can see your composite mapped with policy 2, your component called people mapped with policy 1. You can modify this directly in the source view as well if you want. Okay, or you can go with the design view. You can go with the design view. This is the design view, right? So if you click on this, you will get the design view. You can modify the composite file, sorry, bindings file, fault bindings. Then let me deploy the service. This time I want to deploy along with fault policies and bindings. Let's deploy the code. We must deploy the code along with config file. Then what I want to do, I want to stop my card validation system. Okay. Intentionally, I want to raise the error and see what is happening. Waiting for deployment. Okay, deployment finished. Now go back to this. Go to Sova Infra and stop your card validation system. I will stop my card validation system program, default folder, card validation system. I will retire my program. Okay, I retired my program. Done. Now test your order processing system. I'm just giving visa, submit. So now what happened? Go to your enterprise manager, check for the recent instance. Okay, you got a recent instance, open it. Just observe what happened. Go to people. See your people process, executed it, and then you got an error. Card validation system not able to invoke, and then why it is executed? Card validation system. So this is the fault we have. Something wrong? It's a remote fault. The composite retired new instance. Yeah, we got the expected fault only, remote fault. And then why this got executed? Let me deploy the service once again. I don't, something wrong.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I think I got the issue, guys. So, okay, let me tell you one important thing. See, when you are configuring fault policies and bindings, there is an entry created in the composite source view. Okay, let me go to the source view. Observe here, property. There are two properties system generated. I mean, we don't write it manually. System generated two properties we have. Observe this, it's a system generated and wrongly configured. See, fault policy file name, it is the wrong naming convention, right? What is our fault policy name? Fault-policies.xml. I think this is the mistake. Okay, you need to do manual correction. LICIES. Okay, faultpolicies.xml, and binding file is this came properly. I mean, here the file names are not static name, guys. I mean, you can give any naming convention to this file, but the same name you have to use here. Okay, same name. Okay, done. Anyway, let me deploy the code and test it now. Most probably this is the issue. Click next and finish. So if you don't provide proper naming convention, your composite don't know what is the policy file name and what is the binding file name. So this is the standard naming convention, but it is not fixed. I mean, static names to follow. If you are really interested, you can give your own naming convention. You can say your project name faultpolicies.xml, project name fault bindings.xml. You can use a custom names as well for these two files, but the same custom names you have to use under these properties. Okay. So I think the wrong name configured here. So our execution was not, the fault was not handled properly. Let's see with the latest test. I deployed the code, deployment finished, submit the request, and go and check the instance. Okay, you can see the instance, open it. Open your people process. Okay, observe this. I'm in audit trial. If you observe this, your invoke activity faulted. Okay, and see the message here, fault recovery. See within the box braces, if you see that fault recovery, that means control went to your fault framework, fault policies. And what is the action executed? Rethrow is the action executed. See what we configured in fault policy 1. Let's go back to fault policy 1. In fault policy 1, remote fault, I configured the default rethrow. Okay, so the rethrow action executed. So if you see this keyword fault recovery, that means this action performed by your fault framework or your fault policies document. Okay, what rethrow means, what we mean by rethrow? Rethrow means again send the error back to the original position. Which activity raised the error, send the error back to the same activity. That is the meaning of rethrow. Okay, so once the error come back to the invoke activity, there we have catch branch for remote fault. That catch branch executed. Suppose I want to execute a different action instead of rethrow. Let me say abort. I want to execute abort. Right click and deploy the code. Hope you understand why we got the problem. Initially, why the code was not executed, because in the composite file, property was not properly configured. So I fixed the property. Maybe this is an issue in 12.2.14 version. We are using 12.2.14 version, right? This could be the issue in this version of the JDeveloper. Okay. Different JDeveloper versions have different issues like this. We can fix them. Few things we can fix manually. Okay, done. So now submit the request. Check the latest instance. This time I'm expecting an abort action instead of rethrow action. Let's wait for the instance.
Master recording ఆపినట్టున్నారా?
No, it's recording. Recording in progress. Okay, now see this. Our people process is calling invoke activity card validation system, and it is errored out. The fault recovery, see the tag fault recovery, and it is terminated. See, there is no further execution at all. I cannot scroll down. There is nothing else after this invoke activity, because the action what we performed is terminate. Stop the process immediately. So earlier, before this test case, what we did, we used the action called rethrow. Rethrow means send the error back to the original activity. That is, in our case, it is invoke activity. From there, execute the regular process. So from invoke activity, it is going to catch all branch. Okay, you can also see this in flow. If you go to flow diagram, invoke activity, see the fault. Here you can see the fault recovery and what is the action performed. Okay, done. So what I did, I'm directly handling policy 1. See, people process. In people process, if you get any error, handle the error by using policy 1. Let's assume policy 1 is not handling remote fault. Let me delete this remote fault. I will delete the remote fault. Okay, I'm in policy 1 and remote fault and binding fault. Remote fault I'm deleting. Okay, so in policy 1 we have no remote fault. Okay, but in the bindings file, what I configured, BPEL control goes to policy 1. BPEL, any error, control goes to policy 1. But in policy 1, I don't have remote fault. Okay, so if BPEL respective error in BPEL not able to handle in this respective policy, control obviously goes to composite level. In composite level, are we handling remote fault? In policy 2, go to policy 2. Check, are we handling remote fault? Yes, we are handling remote fault. And use an action. I'm using an action called default rethrow. Default rethrow. Okay. Let me rethrow. You already know what you mean by rethrow. Okay. Let's see here. What I want to show you is people level I configured policy 1, but there is no remote fault. Automatically control goes to composite and execute policy 2. Policy 2 is handling remote fault. This part I want to show you. Okay. Let's deploy your code. Oh my God, I did not select the config file. Let me do it once again. Okay, I will do the deployment once again. I did not select the config file last time. Okay, done. Finish. So the objective is clear. Okay, uh, our people is actually pointed to policy 1, but policy 1 is not handling remote fault. So control goes to composite level. First, it will check component level only, people level only. The control, your WebLogic server will check, is there a way to handle the remote fault in policy 1? But when the policy 1 don't have remote fault, then only control goes to composite level and then try to execute policy 2. Okay, let's see that. Done. Exit, submit the request. Go and check the recent instance. So we use the action in policy 1. There is no remote fault at all. There is no remote fault at all. So obviously control goes to policy 2 because it is connected with composite. Let's see that. Okay, go to your latest instance and you can check this. Check this fault recovery and rethrow fault. Rethrow fault. It is showing rethrow fault, but this rethrow fault we configured only in policy 2. Only in policy 2 remote fault rethrow action. In policy 1 we don't have remote fault at all. So hope you understand how the priorities, I mean how it will get executed. Let's say people policy 1 don't have remote fault. Composite policy 2 also don't have remote fault. Then what happened? Control again go back to your invoke activity, I mean people process and execute the regular catch and catch all branches. Okay, that also you can test. You can test that by deleting the remote fault in your policy 2 and you can test it. Okay, let me show you one more action. I will configure remote fault here in the policy 1. The policy 1 I want to configure remote fault, and then there is an action called human intervention. Okay, little different action. Let me show you. Deploy. Human intervention means your process will not be terminated, your process will not continue, your process will be paused. Your process will be paused until you fix the error. Okay, let me show you. So I deployed it. In policy 1, I configured the remote fault and the action is human intervention. What is this human intervention? You can see. Okay, so let's deploy the code. Okay, code, build success, deployment finished, submit the request, go back to the instance, get the latest instance. So I said, it's a human intervention action. We'll see how it is. So human intervention action means your process will not be terminated, your process will not be continued, it will be paused. Okay, and you need to fix the issue and continue the process. You can recover the instance. See, the status is recovery. You can recover it. Open it, how you can recover, I will show you. So what it is saying, your invoke activity pending. See, this is not error. This is not terminated or continued. It is pending, I mean paused. And see the fault recovery, marked invoke activity as pending for manual recovery. Pending manual recovery. Of course, this is paused. This is paused. Okay. So there is a way we can handle this. What we want to do, you can check what is the error, why this is paused. You can check the error, right? So if you go to the view payload, you can see the reason why it is errored out, because this target system is down. The target system, the card validation system is down. Okay, that is the problem, and I stopped my process here. Okay, so what is the solution to resolve this error? If your card validation system is up and running, then this problem will be recovered. Correct? So what we need to do, go to flow instance. You must have a recovery composites. Oh, where is it? Okay, so the solution here is first go and fix the card validation system. Go to card validation system, start the program, activate it. That means I'm fixing the problem. Whatever the problem we have, that we are fixing. Now we need to retry this. Okay, retry this. So there must be an option here. Where is it? We must have an option to re-trigger this only from invoke activity. I mean, we don't go to other steps. Okay, yeah, okay. Sensors here, maybe oh, here. Composite select. I must see a recovery option. Okay, yeah, here it's. You can see the hyperlink here. So this is the fault, right? We got this fault and we understand the fault, what it is. We understand the fault, what it is, and we applied a solution. What is the solution in our case? Our solution is restart the card validation system, and we did it. Now you have an option. If you click this hyperlink, you can see there is a retry or abort options. Abort means your process will be terminated. We know what is abort. No, I don't want to terminate my process. I want to go for retry. If you just click on retry, your process will be continued from the place where it is stopped. See, your process will be continued from the place where it is stopped. Is it clear? Before I click on the button, just observe this. This is paused, and we already understand the error, and we fixed the error also. Now we want to retry that. Okay, I want to retry that. Click on this. Otherwise, you can click on the recovery required. You can click on this hyperlink as well. If you click on this hyperlink as well, you will get the same button. Okay, let me click on retry. So now what happened? The request, wherever it is stopped, from the same place, the request will be submitted. Okay, observe this. The first attempt, people is calling card validation system, it is failed because the card validation system is down. And then when we retried, from the same point, the process started and continued the execution. This is called human intervention action. A human has to interact, look into the error, understand what is the error, fix the error, and retry the process. So this is what we can do by using human intervention. Okay, any questions as of now? See, the regular process will be executed. Then this is about fault framework. This is about fault framework and how to handle fault policies and fault bindings. I have shown you few actions. Of course, guys, you can go through internet and check the different other actions. We have different other actions, right? Not just the actions what I have shown you. I have shown you only 3 actions, but there are many other actions you can see about human intervention, Java action, replay, rethrow. This is an assignment for you. Explore all these actions through internet and Oracle documentation, and come back with your questions. Okay, so that's it for today. Let me stop the recording.
This conference will now be recorded.
Sorry, I forgot to commit my code. Let me commit the code. Git GUI. I need to commit my code. So what is new here? Composite file. Composite file, we have modification. I mean, two properties we introduced. Of course, system generated. We did not made any manual changes, but the file name is wrongly configured. I fixed it manually. Okay. And then you have a bindings file, fault bindings file, and you have a fault policies file. Fault policies file. Anything else we need? Jar not required. So no other file is required. Done. Implemented fault framework in OPS project. Okay. Commit and push. Now I want to merge the code into main branch. Okay. Then let's go back here and git check out main branch, git pull origin fault framework. Then commit the code. Push the code into main branch. Done. So that's it, guys. So fault framework implementation is completed. Okay. Thank you. So let me know if you have any